Well, good afternoon. Welcome to another edition of Live with Pastor Al. I'm your host, Pastor Al Davis. I'll be with you until 2 o'clock right here on AM 1220 The Word. I hope you'll be able to stick with us, and we're not going to be having phone calls today, so apologize for that. We have a special guest in the studio with us today, Kimberly Deemer, and she is the Executive Director with the Hugh Jackson Foundation. And we are going to be talking about human trafficking today, and it's an important subject, especially Super Bowl weekend coming up, and we're going to be talking about that, what you need to know about it, and hopefully some things that we can do about it. But before I do that, I want to give a special shout out here this afternoon to the officers and the dispatchers with the Cleveland Police Department 4th District. You're involved in a Code 1 child endangerment situation on Wednesday morning, early Wednesday morning. And I just want to thank you for what you did. I want to thank you for your professionalism. And I want to thank you for the caring that was evidenced on the part of the officers in dispatch on early Wednesday morning. So you know who you are. Thank you so much as I can say. All right. Well, thanks for that. And again, we're going to be talking about human trafficking here today, and what it is, and how it affects us, and what we should know about it, what we can do about it, with Kimberly Deemert. And Kimberly, welcome to the program today.
Thank you for having me, Pastor Al. I really appreciate the opportunity, and thank you to your audience and for everybody who not only opens up their mind, but please open up your heart as we move forward with our conversations today, because human trafficking really affects everybody in our communities, everybody in our homes, in our churches, and even in our place of business. It's unfortunately a multi-billion-dollar industry in this country alone. Most people think of human trafficking as, the Liam Neeson box office smash, the movie Taken. And while that does happen, those are not to be dismissed. It's not the typical in this country. It's not somebody's just, whisked away in some piano van somewhere and taken off to a foreign country. A lot of times our victims actually go back home every day. They go to school, they go to work, and people don't realize what's really happening to them.
Wow. Well, we're going to get into some of the details about that. But before we do that, otherwise I'll forget, what is the Hugh Jackson Foundation and what do they do?
The Hugh Jackson Foundation was first went public in July of 2017. Hugh Jackson, the former NFL coach for the Cleveland Browns, and of course local here to the Northeast Ohio area, him and his wife Michelle Jackson decided to take a very personal experience and try to prevent tragedies from happening in other family members. From a foundation standpoint, we provide education and awareness. Training. We provide policy development procedures for corporations, for whether they're small or large. We work within the different schools all over Northeast Ohio and the entire state of Ohio as far as that goes. We also do rescue and recovery. We have a residential facility for women over the age of 18 in downtown Cleveland, and that is the Hugh Jackson Survivors Residence. It's at the Salvation Army downtown, and we do work very closely with law enforcement agencies. And as we do victim identification and recovery, we have a safe house for them. So they can go there and stay as long as they need be to receive the different services that we try to partner up with other agencies in Northeast Ohio. We also do a lot of guest speaking for legislative processes, and we've been very fortunate to have wonderful working relationships with our government, not only just locally, but on a statewide level. And they're some very dedicated individuals, pretty much in every walk of society, but we need more. And
Yeah.
our elected officials, including President Trump, has really stepped up to the plate to try to do some more awareness so that our communities know what is out there, not only from the victimization standpoint, but how do we prevent victimization and how do we best utilize our resources so that when victims are identified, we can assist with the rescue and recovery and long-term survival.
And is there a website if people want to go to find out more about the Hugh Jackson Foundation, what you do?
Yes, it's www.hughjackson.org, and it's HUEJACKSON clevelandbrowns.org. We're also available on Instagram and Twitter.
Well, thank you, Kimberly. Appreciate that. And you mentioned President Trump. Of course, just this morning, as I was leaving to come to the radio station, he had a live press conference, and he's appointing a position individual to work in combating human trafficking. Herself, I forget the name. I saw her just as I was going out the door, and I didn't catch her name. But she herself is a survivor. And so this is, to have this at the very top level is a blessing. It really is, isn't it, to call attention like this?
It is absolutely a blessing. And there are quite a few states who have representatives, who have senators who are very, very passionate about combating human trafficking in their own states. And to have them collectively together with the support of the president is monumental. And there are a multitude of agencies out there that, whether they're governmental agencies that support the battle against human trafficking or the non-governmental agencies such as ours, collectively, the more we can work together, I think the better we can provide our services to individuals who need us. And hopefully, I would love to be out of a job, quite honestly. I love my job. I'm very passionate about my job. I am a licensed private investigator, so I utilize those skills in what I do for the foundation. But to be out of a job in this environment would be a tremendous blessing. And what I mean by being out of a job is meaning that it's no longer needed.
Right. I understand
and
that,
not for any other reason.
Mm-hmm.
But I pray that there will come a time, and I'm a very proud grandmother of 3 grandchildren. And I would like to think that by the time they're grandparents, what we're speaking of today will be something that's part of the past instead of part of the present.
And a lot of people listening probably think, well, I've heard of this. And like you said, they usually think of like that movie Taken, and somebody whisks them away and all that. But what is the typical situation today? And here in Ohio, how much of a problem is it?
Well, there's a lot of statistics out there, and I will be the first to say I'm not a big fan of statistics. They do serve a purpose. They serve to help us with, funding and identification. But in the state of Ohio, we are currently ranked 4th in the nation for reported cases of human trafficking. And it's critical to note that it's the reported cases. And just like in any other crime statistic, there's many crimes that do not get reported, or they're underreported, or they're just certainly not understood. So those numbers aren't an actual reflection of what's out there. And sticking with, just the whole, Ohio's ranked 4th in the nation for reported cases. It's not only because we have a lot of it that occurs in the state of Ohio. It's more going back to the law enforcement that you gave wonderful acknowledgement to. It's our law enforcement community knowing and understanding what human trafficking is, so they can identify it for those statistics, and then to put that information in the proper databases, which is part of what President Trump is accomplishing through the bill he was signing today. Statistics in law enforcement are not necessarily unilateral from state to state. I will tell you that as a foundation member, I also sit on the Northeast Ohio Amber Alert Commission. We work a lot with law enforcement and Amber Alerts, and I can remember early on people asking me, well, why are we involved in the Amber Alert Commission? And they said, isn't that just for children who are missing? Mom and dad wake up one day and their child is gone, or they didn't come home from school. And what a lot of people don't understand is, from the Amber Alert side of things, unless a child's life is considered to be an imminent or immediate danger, an Amber Alert isn't issued. But there are cases where children go missing and they're gone for a long time. We don't know what's happened to them. We don't know if they're runaways, if they have been abducted, whether it's parental abduction or a stranger abduction, and what's going to happen to them after that point.
Right.
We don't want to wait to find out that a child has become victimized in the sex industry through human trafficking. We want to make sure we get them recovered before they become victimized. And our biggest mission is prevention, which is much easier than rescue and recovery, because recovery is it's a lifelong process. And in that same note, and you mentioned the 4th District and the Cleveland Police Department, we are also part of the founding board of the Cleveland Family Center for the Missing and Exploited Children. And that was co-founded by Gina DeJesus, and I'm sure you
Right.
all
Listeners are
recognize
familiar.
that
Yes.
and her cousin Sylvia Colon. And we, again, provide services for family members who, whether they're an adult or a child who goes missing, and they kind of fall through the cracks. They're not somebody that an Amber Alert's immediately going to be issued for, but that individual is still missing. Gina is one such example. She was missing for 9 years. Amanda was missing. Amanda, Gina, and Michelle were missing for 9, 10, and 11 years, respectively. And nobody really knew where they were at. And because of their ages, many of the general population thought they were just runaways. And statistically, and again, I'm going to use statistics just because people, understand those, but through the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, their analyses of individuals who go missing, particularly children who go missing, 1 of every 7 runaway children are confirmed to be victims of human trafficking. And within our local law enforcement agencies, what we strive to teach them and to educate them to are the warning signs of individuals who have gone missing as a result of human trafficking. And it's a very challenging situation, and collecting data is extremely difficult because most of our victims don't realize that they're a victim of human trafficking.
And what types of things should people look for? Because I know with the Super Bowl going on down in Miami, they were having training sessions for hotel workers, Uber drivers, different things, people who would come in contact. And it's not just the front desk, but the people who work that clean the rooms and things in the hotels. But what can our listeners, what should they look for to be aware of what's happening?
I tell everybody, it's not just what you're looking for, it's how you feel. Because your gut instinct, when something doesn't feel right, most of the time it's because it isn't right. They're, victims of human trafficking will take on many faces, and they don't all look the same. And what I mean by that, they don't all look like they're afraid. They don't all look like they've been beat up. They don't all look like they've been drugged. Many situations that I get phone calls on, and I'll share one very brief story. I had a family who was at a playground who there was a young woman who was a teenager who was going around and talking to parents saying, listen, if you need a nanny, I'll come work for you. And as it turned out, and going through this whole story, she ended up being a victim of human trafficking. And what her trafficker was compelling her to do was to get almost into a trusting relationship with the family so that they could in turn get to their children. And she was the recruiter because she had outaged that trafficker's desires and his clientele. So he was using her to recruit other children to become a part of a family so that she could engage the children of that family.
Wow.
And she was at a playground of all places.
Now, I was going to ask them, you mentioned she had outgrown, the age range. What would be the typical age range?
There's not really a typical age range because, some of our youngest victims that we have recovered in Northeast Ohio are as young as 2 years old, which is quite devastating when you think about that in an age category. But the ones that are most susceptible to being groomed, and I'll explain that in just a moment, but to being groomed and being brought into the life of human trafficking in the sex industry are going to be your teenagers. And they're going to be usually between 13 and 17 years of age. But that doesn't mean that those are our only victims that are out there. But victimization happens, and this is really important for parents to be aware of, for teachers to be aware of. Traffickers prey on the vulnerabilities of an individual. Teenage years are increasingly difficult because, unfortunately, social media has created a platform for traffickers to groom their potential victims without the victims even being aware of this. And most parents aren't aware of it either. And they'll start friending somebody and having conversations with them and finding out what their hot spots are. And their hot spot could simply be that they're a teenager and they don't like the rules that mom and dad have put in place for them.
Right.
So a trafficker will pretend to be their best friend, and the next thing you know, 6 months down the road, which is the average grooming time, this teenager is meeting with their trafficker in a mall somewhere. They think it's a safe environment, or at a high school game, or some other social function that is presumably very normal and natural and safe. from most parents' perspectives. And it doesn't take much to find out what motivates that child. It could be, as a young lady, she might want the newest fashions that are out there, the newest designer items, the newest designer purses. And the trafficker will convince her that there are ways that she can acquire those, and it's harmless. And, every teenager has sex. Now you can do this for money, and you can have all these beautiful designer items. But what those teenagers don't realize is once you get into trafficking, you're not getting back out.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen that easy. So for parents, when you see your children come back home, whether it's the parents, it's the school teacher, it's a trusted family friend, or a neighbor, and you slowly start seeing personality changes that for your child isn't normal. When they start coming back home and they have things that that you didn't buy them, and their children can't afford because they're working at Starbucks, or some other fast food chain location, and they're making minimum wage, you're not going to be buying high-end designer things. Start questioning different behaviors. When your children become more withdrawn, more emotional, seem to want to distance themselves from their closest friends, from their normal routines, those are red flags that either something is going on or something might happen down the road. Pay attention. As parents, we need to pay attention.
Now, is this exclusively women? We talk mostly about young girls and women, young women. What about boys?
It happens with young men too. The majority of human trafficking victims, particularly in the children arena, are women or female, but it also happens to our young men and our transgender or individuals who have sexual identity issues or trying to figure out their place in life. They are rapidly becoming some of the most vulnerable victims that we've been able to identify, as well as those who have emotional or physical handicaps. They're looking for love, they're looking for acceptance, they're looking for attention, and something that makes them feel better or whole. There's something that they're missing and they're trying to fill it, and unfortunately they're filling it with the wrong thing.
Yeah, now we talked mostly about with human trafficking and the sex industry, but there's other aspects of human trafficking too, aren't there?
There are. It happens also in the labor industry. And, I tell people who like to travel, when you go places and you see, and I'm just going to say New York, I was just there last week on business, and you see these street vendors who are selling the latest fashion trends, but they're knockoffs, they're counterfeits. I can assure you, other than the fact that there's other things going on, other laws that are being broken, those counterfeit materials most of the time are being made by individuals who are victimized through the labor trafficking industry. And there's a very rapid turnover from somebody who has been brought into another country through human smuggling, and then human smuggling quite often will lead into human trafficking. And when you get into human trafficking, whether it be the labor side or the sex side, there's a lot of crossover in those industries. When you think about your landscapers and you're hiring a landscaping crew, I encourage people really know who you're hiring. Make sure that they are not victims of the labor industry and the human trafficking supply chain. Again, human trafficking is estimated anywhere between $90 to $110 billion annual revenue.
Wow.
So imagine if you own a business, let's say this beautiful office building we're in, and you've got a janitorial company that's coming in to clean it every night at the end of the night. Do your homework. Make sure that the people that are coming in to clean your building are not victims of human trafficking. Most industries that you see the labor trafficking side of things are going to be your service industries. So they're going to be your domestic help, whether they're an au pair, a nanny, housekeeper, somebody who works in a commercial setting, such as landscaping maintenance, building maintenance, even in the construction industry. And we, believe it or not, have a big problem with that in Ohio. I was just meeting with Senator Fetter and Representative Galinsky on what we can do about that issue.
And we've been talking about the victims a little bit, but we got about 5 minutes or so left. I was going to ask, who are the people who are doing this? Who are the victimizers typically? I mean, I don't want to spend as much time on that because I'd like to, kind of focus on what our audience can do. Maybe some proactive things, some resources for them. But just out of curiosity, is there kind of a profile, or is it across the board? Is it like gangs? Is it like just
consumers are driving the market?
Mhm.
Unfortunately, it's basic economics. If
Yeah.
we get rid of the consumerism, then we really eliminate the traffickers who are doing this. Over 41% of children who are victimized in the human trafficking side of life, 41% of them are victimized by their family members.
It's just sad.
And
isn't
that
it?
crosses every boundary.
Yeah.
Every boundary. From your consumer standpoint, it's people with disposable income.
Yeah, you'd mentioned the William Neeson, I can't say his name right now, movie earlier, Taken, and of course that was a international gang,
Yes.
and then bring I think it was the Serbians or Croatians or something, all this kind of stuff. But what you're saying is it's not necessarily that.
No.
It could be family members,
It could be family members.
Neighbors, friends,
Yes.
things like that, and. Yeah, we really need to pray for our children today, don't we? Keep an eye on them.
Absolutely.
And, it's a hard thing. People almost get frightened. But what should people take away from the program today? Because you only got a couple of minutes left. I don't want to leave people thinking, "Oh my children! There's nothing I can do. I got to lock them in a room and armed guard 24/7."
Absolutely not. And it doesn't just happen to children. I bring it all back down to love.
Mm-hmm.
Love the people that are entrusted to you. Love your
Yes.
children. Love your spouse. I mean, there are spouses who traffic their partners. It goes down to love. Know the people in your life. Love and respect the people in your life. Keep them close. You're
Mm-hmm.
going to know when things are different. Follow your gut, and we can talk more about that.
Yeah. If somebody is listening and they're afraid that they might know somebody who's involved in this, or maybe even themselves involved, what's the best thing for them to do?
Reach out to their local law enforcement community. There are national hotlines for human trafficking. There's a national human trafficking hotline, but it's a simple 911 call.
Yeah.
Most law enforcement officers would be in, and again, and I will say that we work very closely with our law enforcement agency. They would rather have 99 inaccurate calls in hopes of getting that one that's accurate, and it helps that person. It helps a person recover, and every child, every life is worth recovering.
And yeah, law enforcement, they like rescuing people.
They love rescuing.
I've got family members in law enforcement, retired, and friends in law enforcement, and everybody, with the bad press that police get these days, this is something that when they get a chance to rescue somebody, it really means a lot to them.
It does.
Yeah.
And they mean a lot to us.
Yeah. Well, Kimberly Diebert, you're just what you're doing, how you're able to keep from going crazy yourself. You're dealing with this all the time, but I appreciate you being on the air with us today. And again, what's the foundation? How can people find out more?
Please just go to our website. Again, it's www.hughjackson.org. We're available on social media through our Instagram and Twitter accounts. And just please, follow your gut. That's your biggest tool in combating any crime, whether it's crime against humanity or crimes against yourself. If it doesn't feel right, there's probably a reason why.
Yeah, and I think this goes out to, of course, a lot of our audience are Christians, and we've got people in churches and pastors and things that listen to the program. And as a pastor, we have these kids come through our church, and it's unfortunate there's pastors and Sunday school teachers out there that are kind of aloof from the kids. Well, I don't want to get too close to them, but there's a lot of churches out there that have pastors, Sunday school teachers, and things who are working closely with kids, and oftentimes inner city kids at risk. And this is something they need to know about. So I want to thank you again for being on the program, and encourage people to check out the Hugh Jackson Foundation. That was hughjackson.org, I believe.
That's correct.
And we're about out of time today, and I just want to encourage people to find out more and pray about what you can do to be involved. And thank you, Kimberly, for being with us. Thanks for listening today. We're out of time. Join us next time. God bless. Have a great weekend.
Thank you very much.
This is still recording right now because it's got the end. So everything that we say right at the moment, even though the light is out, is still on until it runs through the announcement there. So we'll get it just a minute here. But let me get over here where I can close that out. But I'll turn this around. You can move it there real quick.
Hi.
Sorry about that.
You want to see more of this? I'll do any education and training you guys need.
Yeah. All right. We lost the thing up there. All right. Well, yeah. Let me close this off right here. So we're going to sign off on YouTube. So God bless. A couple of moments here. I usually let the announcement run.